Mr. Banga, Mr. Shenbagam, Sunil, Sushil, and all the other S's who are in the SLT of TPDDL. I feel very happy to be here. And I will tell you just two quick reasons why I am here, happy. When I was on the board of Tata Power, and in those days, we thought distribution was a bad business, or that is the traditional wisdom, and generation is the Brahmanical business, Good engineers go to generation, and corrupt engineers go to distribution. And there is a proposal that you could become a shareholder and a distribution company came up, and it was hotly debated and contested. But I was a part of the board which said, if you don't have the courage to leave the shores, you will never discover a new land. And we got into this bidding, and then we got what was then called NDPL. And luckily we got a very fine team under Anil Sardana. I heard some really horrendous reports in the initial days. I don't know the detail of it, but at the board when we heard them, I said, "Kahan ke phas gaye?" was a reaction. But it was not founded on good evidence. People are as good as you lead them. And very quickly, it turned around, and I was invited by Anil Sardana because I must have asked a few extra questions at the board meeting. He said, "Isko fasana hai, ye sawal puchte rehta hai." So he said, "You come along." And I came and spent a whole day visiting your various substations and offices in an old Tata estate or something you had at that time. It must be 2003. And in a literal sense, Anil Sardana mere pasina nikal diya. And having done so, he said, "I hope you are convinced that we are in the right direction." Actually, I was. Not because pasina nikal diya, but when you've been in a company for a long time, you get a sense कि भाई ये जहाज ठीक तरह से जा रहा है कि उल्टे तरह से जा रहा है. And since then, of course, thanks not just to Anil Sardana, but the many other colleagues who are sitting here and the ones who sat in your chairs before, you have actually become the pride of Tata Group, as I have seen from the presentations that you just made. And I take a little surrogate pride of my association, though I have done nothing at all in this matter. Just like a teacher takes pride when his students do well in life, as a former director, I take great pride, and I would like to start by congratulating all of you and through you to wish all your colleagues continue to be a Sartaj. It is still a debated point in our country whether distribution can be privatized. And Mrs. Dixit, the late Mrs. Dixit, was a fantastic support. And then we had a little rough time when an IIT engineer became your chief minister. Then we found that even IIT engineers require education, and that seems to have now settled into a more reasoned argument. I don't know how many more cities have been distribution privatization successful. In those days they said Orissa was very successful, but I'm not sure Orissa was ever successful. And I don't know if there's still any other model other than this. I hope there would be more. I don't want you to be the only one. But like a little candle in a dark room, I hope you will continue to show the light, because this country desperately needs. 4 years ago, the then Power Minister was Piyush Goyal, I think, and he presented a fanciful scheme called Uday. And I think the Uday was in his eyes, not in the reality. And I wrote an article in the newspaper saying this will never happen. I was still, I think, in service in Tata's, so I wrote it in a very gentle way. I don't think it has made great progress. and it is still caught up in the same old problem. So power is a very important sector, and I'm very proud to be associated with you and to be here. The reason you have invited me here is not only to give me the joy of seeing that you are a very, not only a proud member, but a very admirable member in the Tata Group, as I could gather from your charts, because I have retired 3-4 years ago, so I'm a bit out of touch with the latest developments. But to share on the occasion of this JRD birth anniversary recently, to deliver the second JRD Tata Memorial Lecture, which is really in his honor and on the subject of business and ethics and morality. So I should get to that subject rather quickly. And I just want to tell you how I want to approach this. The good news, no PowerPoint charts. Because as one of your TSL, what do you call it? The SLT members was saying, the moment you use PowerPoint charts, the point is lost. The power of the point is lost. Because PowerPoint charts are the greatest curse for humanity. Because when I listen to PowerPoint charts, I don't know whether to look at that or to look at the speaker, and whether I should read the chart or understand what he's saying. And maybe my brain is getting a bit old, but even those who seem to understand have actually not understood. That is the trouble with PowerPoint charts. And so somewhere later in my career, I said, if I cannot talk without a chart, then I have nothing to say. Those who have something substantive to say can talk without charts. Those who have nothing to say use PowerPoint charts. And it's not that I'm against PowerPoint charts, but it's being overused like many other things. And so I have started the practice of saying it is not a head-to-head conversation, but a heart-to-heart conversation. Now, if I'm talking about ethics and morality and I want to give you a head-to-head presentation, you lost the plot before you started. So I will use no PowerPoint charts. And I want to there are two parts to what I want to say. The first few minutes I'll talk of the introductory comments, and the second part will be the substantive part. So what do I want to say to you in the introductory part? Ethics and morality are outcomes of a personal compass. What looks ethical to me or perfectly moral to me may not look that to you. For example, if a man raises his hand, should you raise your hand back? And you can have a whole day seminar on it. Depends on this particular circumstance. But it's very important to understand that what is strictly a personal code, a personal compass, to aggregate a number of personal compasses and to produce a corporate institutional compass for morality is quite a challenge, because there's many variances of it, and I shall illustrate that little later. The second point I want to make about ethics and morality, it's easy to give a speech on it, it's very tough to practice it. It is like Baba Ramdev, it's very easy to talk that breathing is very good, but when you start to do all the funny things that he teaches you to do, it can be quite difficult, and most of us don't end up doing it except for the first 1 or 2 weeks. Because the real determinant of ethics and morality is not what you do in the normal course. It is what you do when you are under stress. When you are given a tough choice, that's when your morality. Do you stop at the red light when you are on your way to the airport at 6 o'clock in the morning, where there is no policeman? Do you quickly look at your boss's diary when he's left the room and gone to the toilet because the page is open and he's taking some notes about your meeting or presentation? But these are easier ones. There are others. You made a bad decision, it's gone wrong. What do? Do you correct it by taking another decision? If you look at the collapse of Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers in 2008, Nick Leeson made one bad deal. He didn't want to tell his bosses, so he made another deal to set the bad deal right. That also became bad, and very soon he had more bad deals than good deals. and before you knew what's happening, the whole thing blew up. Our own Tata Finance, many of you were not in Tatas at that time, is a similar case. Soon after I joined Tatas, it has nothing to do with my joining, by the way. We had a managing director called Dilip Pense. I don't think he was a bad human being. I mean, once the man's dead and gone, there's no point analyzing these things because he committed suicide later on. I think he made one or two bad deals that ballooned out of control, so he made another few bad deals and he was caught up in the whole thing, and it was a very unfortunate episode in the history of Tatas. So always remember that you should talk about ethics and morality. It's easy to talk in the calm atmosphere of this auditorium, but the real stress will come when you find that your operating loss has been a little more or a little less, and you tell your CFO, iska bhai jara kuch karo, usko aage karo, piche karo. Such discussions do happen, not because your CEO or CFO is a crook, because there are grey areas in accounting, far many more than in power distribution, I can assure you. So that's the second point I want to emphasize, that it's under stress. The third thing is, if I want to teach somebody something, I need knowledge and I can teach you. So if you want to have lessons on how to distribute power efficiently, if I am trained in that or I've read the books or got a degree in that, I can teach you. Anybody can teach. But education is different from teaching. Very often we use these words interchangeably. To teach, you need knowledge. To educate, you must be a somebody. Kuch kiya hona chahiye. And if you've done it, then you understand the nuances of it. To say that you're able to just not impart knowledge, but a totality of the approach that you have to take. That's why companies, at least when I joined in Hindustan Lever, I joined the computer department back in 1967. I mean, 1967 people didn't know there is something called a computer. I was young, I was 21 and I was enthusiastic. But they said, you first go and learn to sell dalda. I was horrified. I was a blue-blooded Brahmin, like a Pandey from Banaras. I was an IIT engineer, a reasonably good record. I was also a physics honors, and I was going with a ready, literally, shop to shop, selling dalda to dealers. But then that really gave me the education I needed. I won't go into the detail of it because that's not the subject for today. And therefore, it's a very good practice. I think many Tata companies follow it. If you take youngsters to send them out into the field and make them do the day-to-day work. So please remember, there's a difference between teaching and education. And you cannot teach ethics. You can educate about ethics. You can teach power distribution, but you can't teach ethics. The fourth is, you're called Tata Power Delhi Distribution Limited. You're a company. Have you ever thought of where this word company comes from? Anybody knows? Company comes from the Latin word. Cum means C-U-M in Latin. Cum means with. You say you get bed cum breakfast. Bed and breakfast. So it's with. And pani in Latin means bread. So literally, company means with bread. So what is the significance of with bread? It means hum sab roti saath khayenge. We are working as one team, and a company is the concept came from saying, when a group of people work together and take the fruits of it and have some bread together, remember the emphasis on the word together, then it forms a company. Since then, the lawyers have taken over, the English language has taken over, and nobody in a company thinks we are all together. Aapas mein bhi jhagda karte hain, dusron se bhi jhagda karte hain. But it's a good thing on a day when you're talking about the JRD Tata oration to remember what is the original concept of the company and where does the etymology of this word come from. We had a joint venture in one of my jobs earlier with a Moroccan company. And in Morocco, as you know, they speak Arabic. And one day he invited me for dinner at a very fancy French restaurant. And when we were talking about ethics, he said there is an Arabic word called niya. And did I know the meaning of niya? So I said, no, I don't know Arabic. And he said it means, what is your real objective? What is your real goal? Aapka man mein kya hai? What is in your dimag? And I said, we call it niyat in our language. Must have come from the same Arabic source. And he said, I always look for the niya of a person in a presentation. Is it for personal glory or is he doing something which has a larger context of relevance? And that word stuck with me. And therefore, what I want to do, I want to tell you stories. And I'm going to tell you, I've got 9 stories, but I can stop anytime. This is like a cut off if you don't pay your bill. If I find people sleeping, I'll just cut it off. Because that's how you were educated in Niyat. Have you ever been, maybe you've been to some odd school lesson on moral science, but that has probably left very little impact on you. But what your father, grandmother, uncle told you, beta aisa nahi karte, is what you remember. So I'm going to use the same approach and I'm going to tell you 9 stories, many from Tatars, mostly from Tatars actually. But let me start with one which is about happiness. All of us are working for contentment and happiness. You're not working for a salary, remember. Though most of us spend the whole day trying to earn more money, get more bonus, and so on and so forth. So the year I'm referring to is 1893. And I love the story because very few people know it. I have found the story from the diary of a French woman who was a disciple of Swami Vivekananda. And I love telling this story, and some of you might have read it in some of my books, but I think it's not very widely known and it deserves to be widely known. As all of you know, Swami Vivekananda was originally called Narendranath Dutta. He was a Bengali, and he was a brilliant person who, like many brilliant people, he died at the age of late 30s. And he had gone to Chicago for the Parliament of Religions. And here was a saffron-clad monk who was sitting cross-legged and delivering lectures on Awake India in Chicago in 1893. And there was this French lady who was his disciple in that ashram. And she was very impressed with what Swamiji was saying. And she happened to have a friend. She went to the friend and said, "Bhai, isko aake ek baar sun lo. I know you're a very busy man, but Saturday, Sunday, kabhi samay nikal ke ek baar isko sun lo." Why would I listen to a naked Indian chap sitting there in a saffron clothes? She said, "Mere liye aa jao ek baar." So he went. And then she has written in her diary, that's why it's not so well known. It's available in the Vivekananda memorial volumes only. What actually happened between them. But not to go into every single detail. The transaction at some stage said, "I am the richest man in America." Not Jeff Bezos, not Mukesh Ambani, John D. Rockefeller. So Swamiji asked, "How many times richer than the average American are you?" Because I know nothing about riches. He said, "Oh, 100 times. He said, "Do you think you're 100 times smarter than the average American?" He said, "I never thought about it, but I must be. Otherwise, why would I get 100 times the money?" He said, "Has it ever occurred to you that you're merely a pipe, an instrument through which the money has to pass?" He said, "Pass to whom?" He said, "Pass back to the community." He said, "I think that's the biggest load of rubbish I've heard." He said, "Anyway, I want you to think about it, because sometimes you are instruments of some other design." John D. Rockefeller went away, and then he came back after 3 weeks. He had written some check for $50,000 or $5 lakh or whatever. Put it on the table. He said, "Swamiji, are you happy?" He said, "Why should I be happy? Are you happy? If you're doing this to make me happy, it's a waste of time." He said, "What do you want me to do?" He said, "No, I want you to be happy. And just think of this question that I raised with you. Could it be that I'm not 100 times smarter, but I'm a mere pipe. It took 13 more years. I would like to believe that Swamiji had an influence on John D. Rockefeller, because in 1913, Rockefeller gave all his money into a trust. And we all know that Rockefeller Foundation is very well known and that it has done lots of good work all over the world. And I find that an interesting story. If you're doing things for other people's happiness, then you're shortchanging yourself. If you are happy with what you have done, that's the greatest benefit to you. And that's why those who are not happy with what they've done have turmoil. Unfortunately, that turmoil can result in some extreme actions on their part. So seeking happiness is your right. And in seeking happiness, I'm talking of long-lasting happiness, not temporary joy. Your moral compass automatically comes into place. Nobody does wrong things like commit murder or rape, even though it may be momentarily satisfying for some instinct of his, because it can't make you happy. It's not possible. And I find stories as a very good form of writing lessons on morality and ethics, because that's the only way you'll remember these facts. There's nothing new to be said about ethics and morality. It's only the way you say it that can be different, and the way you absorb it that can be different. The second story I want to tell you is from William Hesketh Lever. William Hesketh Lever was the person who founded Unilever. Back in the same time that Jamshedji Tata was thinking about steel here, he was thinking about soap. And I mentioned these two stories because I have been brought up on soap, shampoo on one side for one part of my career, and motor cars and steel on the other side of my career. So when William Hesketh Lever was a grocer in Manchester, and he was helping his father in their kirana dukan, literally selling soap, and that soap was being sold naked. Like Narol number 1 in Punjab. If you go to Punjab, you'll find one. I don't know if it is still there, but it used to be there in the old days, in my younger days. Narol number 1. And it used to evaporate and become dry, and then it was a bit irritating. So he got this idea here, how can you prevent the moisture from getting out, because soap has X% moisture. And he found a waxed paper, he put it around it, and he found that the act of putting wax around it keeps the moisture in. Then having put the wax around it, he said, kuch to naam likhna chahiye, he wrote sunlight. Then he printed the wrapper. Then he cut the wrappers into the right size. And in that process, Sunlight soap was launched. Then other products came. And therefore, he made lots of money because he was able to go to many countries with a very simple idea which nobody else had thought of before him. Around 1885, he had made lots of money. He was now a global leader. And somebody asked him the question that now that you are a well-known personality all around the world, how do you feel? Do you feel proud of your accomplishments? And he said, listen, I just happened to get an idea and I did something, it's all worked out. I don't know whether I should be proud of my accomplishments because I believe I should work earnestly. So they asked him, what does work earnestly mean? He said, my attitude to work is I should work like a mason. They said, mason? He said, if you see the mason who's laying the road, he puts pavement blocks and cements it, knowing that he will never be able to use it. But for centuries after he has finished his work, other people will go on foot or on horseback or in a horse-driven cart. In those days there was no car anyway, with hope in their heart and ambition in their eyes. And it is for their ambition and hope that this fellow is putting the pavement blocks. So there can be no person more humble than a mason. Because the mason never aspires for the fruit of the work he is doing. Who constructed a flat where you're staying? Did he ever think he will live in that flat? He was some laborer from Andhra or I don't know, Bihar, and he just collected his 200 rupees a day or 100 rupees a day or 300 rupees a day and went and said, "Thoda pet bhar jayega aaj ka." He never thought he'd live in that flat. And this is a very, very beautiful definition of humility. When you, in Hindu philosophy, we say you should be unattached to your work. This is unattached. When you're working for your company with humility, humility defined the way I am defining it, then you cannot be unethical, even under stress. Because your mind will always go back to saying, "Ye to, I am here today, pata nahi kal honge ki nahi." And I love that story. So I've covered happiness, I've covered humility. I want to cover a third aspect. Because these, according to me, if I had to draw a circle like the one that you drew, those bubbles which are around a circle, I would draw these to say this is the roots of ethics and morality, is empathy. Many people think empathy is similar to sympathy. Sympathy is a PowerPoint chart. It is head-to-head communication. Oh, आपके पिताजी मर गए हैं और sorry, भगवान आपको साथ दे. हो गया, I've gone home, he has gone home. But if the person whose pitaji has died is your own brother, or I was going to say if he's your own son, but I said that's not possible for a pitaji to go and see a man who finds it his son that his father has died, unless his wife has been mischievous. He says, "Arey, this has happened to my brother-in-law," and he joins wholeheartedly into the whole exercise and takes part whatever help he can give. Empathy is when your heart is touched, when you are able to live what's happening in that man's heart, the pain in that man's heart. When Mother Teresa saw homeless people on the street, her heart was touched and she set up this Ashadan, this missionaries of charity. You and I, we see poor people and sometimes we ignore them and sometimes we feel sympathy, but certainly I can talk for myself, I won't talk about you. Never had the empathy to do anything about it. But empathy I am referring to is not that everybody should become a missionaries of charity, but empathy at your workplace, with your people, your customers, your employees. And empathy goes well beyond rationality. I'll give you two examples. 1989, there was a fire at Jamshedpur. As you know, on the 3rd of March, there is a big procession in Jamshedpur. Every year, Mr. J.R.D. Tata would be there. As it so happened, for some reasons, in 1989, for the first time, he was required to be in Geneva, he was absent. And despite all the preparations that were made, a fire took place and some of our own officers lost their family, or wife or daughter or son. Very, very painful. I wasn't there, but I'm telling you from what I've heard. Mr. J.R.D. Tata immediately dropped what he was doing, took a plane and came back to Jamshedpur. And then he visited every single one of the families who were affected to inquire what has happened and whether the company has done enough. And expressed his empathy by saying there's nothing that I can do which can restore back what there was. But money is no consideration, he told the HR chief. Do what requires to be done. The same thing was repeated in 2008 when the terrorists took hold of the Taj. And I think all of you know that story because it's much more recent. Ratan Tata went to every single person who had lost a relation or was injured. And the HR chief was very keen, like all HR chiefs, that their CEO should be happy, as you just demonstrated a little while ago. And so they took him to everybody and he said, "Sir, is it all right?" So at the end he said, "Sir, I hope the trip was all right." He had planned it minute by minute. And he asked the chairman, "Was everything all right?" He said, "The question is not whether everything was all right. You've done as much as you can. But have we done enough for these families?" This sense of empathy that you get under stress, by the way, this is under stress. This is not a normal thing. But on a day-to-day basis, there are many situations which call for empathy. And I think it's a very important determinant. Normally in ethics and morality, we think only, is he asked for a bribe, should I pay him or not? That's all that comes into ethics and morality. But I think there's a much broader packaging. It's like a piece of diamond and jewelry which you place in the gold. Otherwise, the beauty of it doesn't show up.